I'm here in London talking to Julian Assange, the founder of the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, which this week released a huge dossier of documents relating to the Afghan war, which Mr. Assange describes as detailing the everyday squalor of war. Julian Assange, thank you very much for talking to RT. Now, you've had a wide range of responses to this publication, ranging from praise right down to criticism. Is that what you were expecting?
No, we knew this was serious material. It covers a 6-year period of war, 92,000 reports, and almost every incident, serious incident that the US military was involved in, together with the times and locations, number of people killed, etc. So we knew that it's in great importance as a historical document and as a primary resource to be used for further investigations. And we also know from those sorts of cases that we've dealt with previously that we always get pushback. Whenever we reveal abuse by some organisation, we always get that organisation or its friends pushing back to try and steer the message away from the allegations that have been raised.
And one of the main criticisms that's been levelled at you is that you have published the villages, the names, and in some cases the GPS coordinates of people, Afghans, who've cooperated with the US military. You've even come under some criticism from human rights organisations for that, and a US official has called it a potential hit list for the Taliban. What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, this appears to mostly be a media beat-up. I mean, we're looking at the issue seriously to see whether that is true. We did hold back 15,000 reports for further review because they had the sort of classification that suggested maybe they contained that sort of material. We approached the White House to ask them for assistance in reviewing the material before we published. The White House did not accept that request. Now, all of this is coming from the Times of London. Now, the Times did not tell us about any of these reports whatsoever. In fact, today I see that there is a title of an article, Afghan Man Already Dead. But actually, if you read the article, what you see at the very bottom is in fact that the man died 2 years ago. So at this stage, we're looking at this as mostly a media beat-up. Of course, we're very concerned to make sure innocents are protected, so we're very happy to receive any evidence of which report is possibly revealing information about someone who is innocent. But once again, at this stage, we have not confirmed those allegations at all. In fact, where we've actually looked at them, we see that those allegations are not correct.
There's also been a suggestion that the release of this information will make it harder for Allied forces to get Afghan citizens to cooperate with them.
Well, what we reveal, and that's what we've been doing for the past 4 years, is the truth about how organisations actually behave. Now, if Afghans don't like how those organisations actually behave, then of course it is their right to engage with them or not engage with them.
It's not so much that, though, is it? I think it's the potential danger that they might be in now that such a huge body of information is in the public domain.
Well, once again, that is an allegation by the London Times, the Murdoch publication, who is in an oppositional relationship to The Guardian, the paper that we collaborated with that printed 14 pages on Monday in relation to this issue. The Times of London printed 0 pages in relation to this issue on Monday. So they are now in an adversarial relationship because they weren't invited to the party.
This has been a media sensation. You released the information initially to selected media outlets, 3 newspapers, and since then you've given what must amount to up to 100 media interviews, including appearing on the Larry King Show. Are you a publicity seeker?
Well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, far from that. In fact, we try to have no publicity. We try to work under the same rules that The Economist runs under, where everyone has a shared byline. But we have found that the public demands that someone speak for an organisation. Now, because of the security threats to the sort of work we do, not many people are willing to step forward and speak. In the end, someone has to do it. I was already a public figure, so I am the person who does that.
These documents date from the period between 2004 and 2009. Why have you published them now and not earlier when they could have made more of a difference?
Well, we only received the material, recently. We publish as soon as possible.
And what processes did you go through between receiving it and publishing it? Talk me through that.
So, when we receive material like this, it is very, this is very difficult to read. This is some internal military language, internal jargon. The format was some computer format, in fact impossible for a normal person to read. So we had to understand the format, reformat this, make it in a presentable way, and then explore the material to pull out the stories and set up our coalition of media groups to do just that. So that took quite a lot of work, not just from us, but also the other three organisations involved.
And there must be a huge amount of expertise involved in doing something like that as well. Where does your expertise and the expertise of your organisation come from?
Well, we have 800 people involved as specialists in different areas, different regional areas, computer specialists in different ways, former intelligence officers and so on. And we draw on that expertise to try and understand material like this.
Now, Washington says that these documents are outdated. Is there any truth to that claim?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about how the war has progressed, well, of course they're not outdated. The war has been going since 2001. That's 9 years. This material covers the last 6 years, with the exception of the last 7 months. Now, that exception is important to some degree. It means that the material is not of tactical significance, so it doesn't talk about troops who are just about to do something, which means it is of essentially no threat to US military forces, but is deeply important for understanding the progress of the war. Now, the White House said that, well, the material only goes up to December, and in December we released Obama's new policy on the war. But Obama's new policy on the war was in fact a continuation of the previous policy, except more troops. So why should the war change so dramatically just because this relatively minor policy change is being put in place? If we look back through the material and we see when the last big policy change was, that was when McChrystal came in. And so we can see from the archive that McChrystal's big changes in policy didn't seem to result in big changes on the ground. There's no reason to believe that Obama's smaller change in policy in December last year resulted in any real change for the war, except perhaps to increase the tempo, increase the number of interactions because there was an increase in soldiers. The White House's rhetorical trick was to suggest that there was in fact no overlap between Obama's policy and this material. In fact, Obama's policy came in December 1st, and this material carries through, in fact, to the end of the year.
You've said that the underreporting of civilian casualties starts at the bottom with the sort of common soldiery, and that really no policy change at the top is going to filter down into that. What do you think could make a difference?
It's an extremely hard situation. I mean, I can't see any easy way out of this Afghan mess. The answer is not for all Western forces, for all ISAF members to go home tomorrow, because that would lead to a power vacuum and so on. But, I mean, the answer is probably a staged withdrawal, making agreements between the Taliban and the Afghan government as that staged withdrawal continues, and perhaps some agreements with Pakistan as well. There will be a continual civil war in Afghanistan. I mean, even if a peace solution is made, I predict there will be a continuation of the civil war, and it will only be once forces have established some kind of equilibrium that we will see an increase towards peace. So no easy options are on the table.
And who stands to gain from the release of all this information?
Well, the Afghan people. I mean, that is their country, and this is the history of their country. And if they are to effectively manage and control their own destiny, they need this information to understand what is happening to their country. But we can also say people in the United States, UK, Australia and others in the coalition who are actually paying for all this war and who are sending their soldiers to be killed in this war. Those people also have the rights to understand what is actually happening. I tell you who will probably not benefit. It is all those military companies who are making extraordinary profits by providing services to troops or weapons or clothing and so on.
But isn't the Taliban and the Afghan insurgency likely to gain from this as well, because you have inadvertently maybe exposed the weaknesses of the Allied forces?
We have to be careful there. Remember, this is a civil war. Everyone says Taliban, but in fact, the Taliban are Afghanis. This is a civil war that is going on. And the Taliban are part of the will of the Afghan people. Now, they're also part of the will, perhaps, of the ISI, the Pakistani Secret Intelligence Service. And, of course, perhaps they're part of the will of Saudi Arabia, who is giving some money to this. But in terms of of bodies on the ground, people actually doing work, the Taliban is part of the will of the Afghan people. And the United States and other forces need to recognize and understand that that is part of the Afghan people, and if you're shooting Taliban, you are shooting the Afghan people. That doesn't mean that they don't have blood on their hands as well. We added up the number of IED events represented in the material, explosions sort of, by improvised explosive devices, and over 2,000 civilians were killed by IEDs. So when the explosive device is placed on a road to blow up a passing convoy, but an Afghan family passes in their car, it will go off and blow them up. So this material doesn't paint the behaviour of any military group in a nice light. There's blood on all sides.
Julian Assange, thank you very much.